right, everybody. November 11th. First of all, happy Veterans Day. If you served, if you know somebody that served, or you served yourself, thank you so much. Thinking about my grandpa Burr Coben, enjoying Veterans Day from a seat up top. It is chilly in Charlotte. Man, we had 39 degrees yesterday. We had 42 degrees today. And I am lucky enough to be joined by Jesse Coger. For those of you who have been following along, Jesse and I have done content in the past. We also got together at ACC Media Day. We were both talking about how this was a make or break season for both of us. And it appears it's been break for both. But Jesse, aside from that, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Did not expect the weather that we're having here in the Charlotte area. Like, I was not ready for snow flurries last night. It wasn't a lot, but I wasn't ready for that. So looking forward to a game in Florida this weekend where the weather's going to be nice. That one next week in Raleigh might be dicey. So it might be really cold for that one. But yeah, when you think back to when we talked about these two teams at media days, I think we were both kind of hyped up for the season, ready to kind of see how things played out. And then after week one, we kind of felt good about where both teams were standing. And even, like you mentioned before with Virginia Tech and their close loss to South Carolina, we thought, okay, we could be something. And who would have ever thought we'd be sitting here at 4-5 versus 3-6 in the James Franklin Bowl, apparently.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that for sure. We're going to talk about the James Franklin tie-ins this game. I'm getting the Franklin, Tanklin for Franklin. Apparently, James Franklin, allegedly, according to the boards, is in Blacksburg looking at homes today. This would be like the second or third time that he's been doing that. But it's been rather crazy. I think a fun place to start here is just going back and forth on asking, obviously we play Florida State this week. We'll get into the game, but as a Virginia Tech fan, I want to ask you some questions about Florida State. And if you have some questions for Virginia Tech, I'll do my best to answer them. But my first question is, how the bleep are you guys 4-5? Like, when I was going through the activity of putting my notes together, I sent you a text last night and I was like, hey, can you give me some pointers on your team and some things to look out for? And you gave me some good stuff. But if you just look at y'all's box scores, and what I do before games is I use the Score app, and the Score app will basically give you a breakdown of where teams rank offensively, defensively, and everything else. And I'll just read some numbers here for you. I'm sure you're familiar. Florida State's offense produces 493 yards per game. That's third best in America. They're top 20 in scoring, top 15 in rushing yards per game. And then you flip it over to the defense, you're top 25 in yards allowed, you're top 35 in points per game, and you're top 50 in passing defense. So I ask you, how does that equate to 4-5? Like, I don't understand.
It sounds amazing on paper, right? It really does. But the problem is we've had a kind of a tale of two seasons, right? Early on, the Alabama game was peak FSU. Like, it was great on both sides of the ball. That was our ceiling, apparently, is what we found out. Then one thing I will say with the numbers on the season from a whole is if you look at what they did against Kent State and what they did against East Texas A&M, and then you filter that out, the numbers do come back to earth a little bit. And that's something that's been a staple of Gus Malzahn throughout his careers, where he will really pour it on against bad teams. And so, I think one of those was like almost 800 yards against one of those teams. And so that does skew the stats a little bit. But then you look at Virginia, that was a game where you scored plenty of points, but you gave up 46. Yep. Then Pitt, you give up 34 points to a freshman quarterback making his first road start. You scored 31, you just couldn't get over the hump. So then defense finally starts to find its footing a little bit. And then you get Miami come to town. You really, I know people, if you look at the box score in that game, it looks like it was close. It was not. It was 28-3 late in the third quarter. And then you have the putrid, absolute, probably the second worst loss in Mike Norvell's tenure outside of Jacksonville State when you lose to Stanford. To me, that was the one that really is the black eye on the schedule. If you had beat Stanford and you had beat, say, Pitt, and we're sitting here at like 6-3, I don't think you hate that, right? I don't think you hate that. I think you're okay with it. And I don't think you're having the firing conversation, but the offense has really kind of went into a shell here lately, and the defense has now started to play good. So I think we saw a brief moment in time against Wake Forest where when both sides show back up like they did against Alabama, you can see this team being pretty good. Then you go to Clemson and the offense kind of shoots itself in the foot repeatedly. It's just a mistake thing, man. Like, there's so many costly penalties, so many turnovers when you're driving the ball, little things like that. It's like, we are great. I think I saw recently where we had outgained like 6 of our opponents this year. we're just losing. We're finding ways to lose the game. So like the yardage and moving the ball and doing those things are there, but when it comes to actually turning that into points, we're just having a problem right now. And last week against Clemson was pretty tough.
So it's also funny to look at your schedule because coming into the season, you thought your schedule was going to be difficult because Alabama was on it and Clemson was on it and Miami was on it and Florida was on it. In reality, Alabama's really good, but Virginia's also pretty damn good. Pittsburgh's really damn good. And it's just weird how all of this kind of worked out. It's the teams that you almost banked on kind of being auto W's turn out to be really good teams. I'm curious, do you sense, I always ask this in seasons that are disappointing, did you ever sense any quit in the team? That's the one thing that I'd say about Mike Norvell is I haven't sensed that y'all let go of the rope. It's more so like you look at these scores, to your point, right? When the offense is humming, 31, 77, 66, 38. Those are your point totals through the first 4 games of the season. And then you look at the defensive side, 28, 34, 27, and then 24. So, yeah, it truly is a tale of two seasons. To get back to my original question, do you sense it's quit or do you sense it's just not working? Granted, with 2 brand new coordinators and a ton of new players on the field.
Yeah, I would say no to the quit part, right? Because last year we saw quit. We saw what quit looked like during the 2-10 season. There are games, I would say Stanford was a great example, where the team looked lifeless, right? But they still they didn't quit. Like when I define quit, what we saw last year for Florida State was just, guys half-stepping out there, going half speed, brother-in-law, as we used to call it, where you're just kind of, I'll let you block me and I'll block you and we'll just get out of this play together. Things like that, where loafing was really rampant last year.
Yep.
You're not really seeing that last year or this year so much, but there have been a few games where you do question, is the quit coming? Because they're not really playing with a lot of energy and effort. And we did see that against Wake Forest. So whatever happened over the bye week, there was a lot of rumors about Mike Norvell's job. They moved into the football-only facility that week, and so it was coming off a bye week, and it looked really good. And then you go into the Clemson game, and it just wasn't really there again. So consistency has been the biggest problem for this team. But, again, you mentioned it. You look at all the losses up until last week against Clemson, I believe we're by 1 score. So we've been in every single game. We just haven't been able to find ways to win consistently. Rather, we find ways to lose consistently. And that's really what's been the hard part. But I don't think they've quit yet. Man, I just think the hard part is right now, to make a bowl, we have to win 2 out of the last 3 games. And 2 of the last 3 are on the road. And we also haven't won a road game since 2023. So I think you're going to be up against a challenge there. I don't know, man. They haven't quit yet, but it's just they've almost seemed to regress every single week, which is really weird.
So I have to ask, where are you with Mike Norvell? Because I'll be honest, and I've said this on my podcast a bunch of times. It's always weird, right? You never want to see anybody get fired. You never want to see anything like that happen. But I was shocked when we got to noon on Sunday and then 5 o'clock on Sunday and then 8:30 in the morning on Monday. And it's like, okay, I guess this is a move that's not going to happen. And you may be more educated on this to talk than I would. We put out this article from Tomahawk Nation that broke down the Florida State financial situation. And I'm curious, can you just tell me where you think the fan base lies on Mike Norvell and how much does the financial situation kind of tie into Mike Norvell still calling plays, still being the head coach of Florida State?
Well, if I put my AD cap on, I fired him in the 3rd quarter of the Miami game. So I tweeted that out when we were down 28-3 against Miami. I said, I think it's time. Let's go scorched earth. Let's fire everybody. Let's just start over because this just isn't working. And that was met with mixed emotions, right? I got flamed for that a lot, but apparently I was just early to the party. Yep. Then the Pitt loss happened. Then the Stanford loss happened. Then the Clemson loss happens. And now I think everybody pretty much understands. I'd say you have about 80% of the fan base that wants him gone because we realize he's not really probably going to be the guy long term, right? He had a great season in 23. He gets credit for that. That's wonderful. But there's a lot of things under the surface that people don't, a casual non-Florida State fan doesn't realize. Like Mike Norvell has not recruited well. He has not developed well. And so everybody knows Mike Norvell just kind of robs the portal ATM every single year. But the high school just really hasn't been there. The high school recruiting hasn't been there. The development hasn't been there. We have not developed a single quarterback out of high school since his arrival. Jordan Travis is the only one that's really been good, and he was a transfer from Louisville. So I think most of the people are out on Mike Norvell now. I was surprised that the firing did not happen the Sunday after the Stanford game, but it was a West Coast game. We thought maybe coming back, it was super late. Maybe they'll do it Monday because you're going into a bye week. It was the perfect week to do it. Bye week going into Wake Forest. Let's get an interim coach going. And then they actually did the opposite. They came out with the vote of confidence and said, we're going to support him through the rest of the season. And that was met terribly, right? Everyone was like, what are we doing? And I think a lot of people want it done now. And a lot of that probably has to do with the coaching cycle that we've seen, where a lot of programs are ripping the Band-Aid off right now mid-season so they can get an early start. I do believe there are two scenarios that's working behind the scenes right now. I think the administration, obviously, as you know, any administration does not want to put $60-70 million of dead money on the books. They don't want to fire Mike Norvell. But at the same time, that's why I think they gave him the rest of the season. Let's see if he can go 7-5, make a bowl. We could justify bringing him back, maybe for another year. It's going to be a little bit cheaper. We have a tough schedule next year.
To be fair, what's also crazy, and I think it's lost in everything, is it's such an instant gratification world. And you look at some of the results. Florida State's preseason over-under was 7.5, was it not?
Yeah.
Like the expectation was to win 7 games. And you look at some of the moves that's going on in the SEC. You look at some of the chattering coming out of the Big Ten and people being like, we need to fire so-and-so. And it's like, well, can you look at what your preseason expectations were? Like, that's what I always kind of come back to is, look, when conference affiliation matters so much and when conference records mean so much, the conversation, unfortunately, have shifted from, are you going to get us into the playoffs this year, or are you on track to get us into the playoffs in the next 3 years? And I think that is a really, I don't want to say, I think disappointing is really the word that I can come up with here, because especially for schools like Virginia Tech, to a lesser degree Florida State, but still Florida State, it was a big deal to go play in the Camping World Bowl. It was a big deal to play in the Gator Bowl. It was a big deal to play in the any of those like tier 2 bowl games. Like that was something you can hang your hat on. Now, if you lose 3 games, 1, your entire roster is probably looking to go elsewhere. And 2, there is a microscope on what you're going to look like next year. So you've sped this process up to, I wouldn't want to be a coach right now. I tell you what.
Unless I had a big buyout, then I would be okay with it.
That's
the American dream, man. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think when you look at Mike Norvell, the problem is he seems to assemble a team every year, not build a program.
Yes.
Which is the portal thing. And so I think our problem is, how sustainable is the future of this? And then you look back to the 2-10 season last year, like that should never happen at a place like Florida State. And I understand the snub and all that stuff. I get that. But it should never happen. And then we're 2-12 in our last 14 ACC games. You have to work really hard to be 2-12 in ACC play at a place like Florida State. And the thing, I think with the midseason firing, one of the only reason I don't really get on board with that a whole lot is because Mike Norvell doesn't call plays. Gus Malzahn does, Tony White does. He's a CEO head coach. So it's not really going to change anything. I do think Florida State is working behind the scenes to kind of vet some things out. Like, can we make this happen? If we can, who's a realistic target? You are going to be jumping into some deep water this year with a lot of other coaching openings. You got LSU, Florida, and Penn State up probably at the highest part of the list there. But I think Florida State could get a good candidate. I just think they're kind of like, well, it doesn't really make a difference if we fire him now or later. You're probably going to have to wait till the end of the regular season to get who you want anyway. But if they do bring him back, I think the elephant in the room is that we all know it's because of the money. We all know it's because of the money. And I think if he comes
what is
back
the situation with the money? How bad is it? Is it bad? Like, there are some schools that are in bad financial situations. Is Florida State's particularly worse for some reason?
I don't think it's bad. I think it's bad timing. The timing is they just finished $400 million worth of facility upgrades. And so that really hurts. They did the remodel of the Doak Campbell Stadium, and then they built a football-only facility, which they just opened. So they've spent a ton of money on this program. And then the contract that we did with the coaching, with his extension, was it wasn't dumb to do at the time, right? We had just went
Right.
13-0. Alabama was calling and all that stuff. So it wasn't bad at the time, but it was a bad contract. You gave 8 years, you gave an insane buyout. And so I think if that buyout was, $15 million, he'd have probably been gone last year. And so I think we know it's money, and I think we know it's a bad timing for money, because you also just fired the rest of your staff before this year, and you brought in Gus Malzahn, you brought in Tony White. You've had to overpay for some of those guys. So not only are you looking at the 50-something million for Mike Norvell, you also have the assistants to buy out in the first year of their contract. You got to bring in another coach and more assistants. So, you're looking at $70-80 million to make this change happen. Of course, as most of you know and your listeners know, that it doesn't have to be paid out all up front. This is not one of those buyouts. You can pay it out through the end of his contract. He also has the clause where he has to go out and look for work at a market rate, so that could offset the buyout. So it could come down a little bit, but there's no way that they can justify bringing him back outside of, we just can't afford it. And I don't know what their checkbook looks like, but I do believe that even with all the money that they've spent, if they really wanted him gone, they could make it happen, because I think they also know that it's going to be expensive to keep him too. I mean, you look at the ticket sales are going to go down. How do you, the problem I think that Florida State's in right now is, how do you generate the excitement to get more NIL dollars, to get more funding, to kind of help get you out of this mess? It's not going to happen with Mike Norvell, because nobody believes in him anymore. And so I think that's kind of the hard place that you're in right now. And even if you do give him the NIL money to try and buy better players or whatever, which is, it's the game that we play now, we're spending more than Stanford, man. We're spending more than Pitt. So there's a disconnect that's happening somewhere in there, that you can use NIL as an excuse if you're trying to talk about Clemson, and all. But how do you beat Alabama? That's not NIL. And so there's just something going on that I think, I've said before, I think Mike Norvell is so far lost into the mess of what he's created right now. I just don't think he can unwind all that. I don't think he can put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so I think it's time for a fresh start. And I would like to see, like, everyone who has had something to do with 2-10 and 4-5, let's just start over fresh with somebody new.
It's really interesting, because it seems like you're in a very similar situation to what Virginia Tech went through with Justin Fuente. Is you have those 2 first years. Obviously, the timelines are different, but at Virginia Tech's perspective, you have those 2 first fantastic years. And then everybody kind of jumps off, I thought prematurely, but jumps off the wagon in 2018. Then in 2019, you come back and you lose the UVA game, which is incredibly pivotal. And then you're at a point where, like, his rate of success will have to be so high to get those people back on board. And I don't know what rate of success would need to be seen at Florida State in the next year. I mean, again, I feel for him, because when he's asked a question, like, I don't remember what the question was, but he was basically like, my job is to get us back to championship standard. I believe that we can get back to championship. I don't know what you want him to say. Like, people will beat him up for saying that. Like, I don't like, what do you want bro to say?
What else is he supposed to say? Yeah.
So my question, as just a person who's followed Florida State as a fly on the wall, what I would have done is, after that Miami result or after that Stanford result, I'm giving it to Gus Malzahn, and I'm evaluating Gus Malzahn as an interim for the rest of the year versus evaluating Mike Norvell for the rest of the year. Because right now it seems like a situation where I have actual Virginia Tech fans that are tweeting and texting me saying we should lose on purpose so that Florida State doesn't fire their coach, so that we can hire James Franklin. Because to your point, whoever hires James Franklin is going to be at a tremendous advantage, given that they're not doing all of this interviewing with coaches who are either in the playoff at another school, coaching at another school, and you immediately get to start recruiting. I think it's worked in Virginia Tech's favor that you guys haven't fired Mike Norvell. And that's maybe a reason why he hasn't signed up until this point, is because Florida State would be really intriguing to him. And it should be, because it's a tremendous job. But my last question for you, if they do decide to move on from Mike Norvell, who do you like? And what ultimately do you think happens? Do you think that there's a way he is coaching next year if he goes 3-0 or if he goes 2-1?
So the problem for me when you look at the remainder of the season is, can Mike Norvell do enough to justify bringing him back for next year? And I think we had an opportunity, right? You beat
Mm-hmm.
the brakes off Wake Forest. Then you had a limping Clemson team that if you had just beat them and maybe you win out or you win 3 of the last 4, that NC State game's
Totally
going to be a
different
little bit tough.
conversation.
It's a totally different conversation. But the thing is, even if, say, he wins 2 of the next 3 games, you've beat Wake Forest. You've beat no offense, we know the situation, a 3-6 Virginia Tech team, an NC State team that's 5-4, and a 3-6 Florida team that just got housed by Kentucky. So do those wins even move the needle? I mean, they feel good, they get you to a bowl, but to me, they don't do enough. And you do bring up a really good point. Like, the goal for this year was 8 wins. 7 was acceptable, 8 was the goal, because we came from 2-10. But I flip that on its head and say we should have never went 2-10, and he was responsible for that. So I do think, as far as him coming back, I think there is a small percentage chance that it does happen. They've already started talking about what they can do to have Tommy Castellanos come back next year. With the first year he had at UCF, he played in 5 games. 1 was a conference championship game, and they've now changed that rule where you can play in that and it doesn't count against your red shirt. So they're trying to bring him back. So if they bring him back, that tells
Tommy
you
Castellanos can go back to Florida State next year. I did not know that.
They're waiting on a waiver. So if he gets it, so he played in the AAC championship game under Malzahn at UCF, right? And that was his 5th game. The next year, the NCAA changed it where a conference championship game would not count against your red shirt. So they're trying to make that happen. And that tells me if they're trying to get him back, that's a Gus Malzahn style quarterback. They're probably going to be back next year. And so my thoughts on him coming back are, at least you could say this: you have given a chance for the changes, the Gus Malzahn, the coordinators, the coaches, the players, all that stuff. You've given that a chance to flesh out. If it doesn't work next year and you win 8 games, which to me the bar should be moved back to where it was. Like, you got your mulligan. Now it's 10 wins, ACC championship, playoffs, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Right. You've had 2 mulligans, essentially. Yeah. And so if you can get to that level, okay, maybe I can see giving you a little bit more time. But again, that schedule next year's tough. I mean, we got Bama, Clemson, Miami, Louisville. We had Notre Dame. They just took them off the schedule because we're going to the 9-game ACC thing. But if they do end up moving on from him, and I will say his last press conference, he talked with a confidence of a guy that's coming back next year. And that makes a lot of us really nervous. But if he doesn't come back next year, if they do fire him, and I think at some point you got to make that decision. I would not wait till the end of the season. I understand not doing it immediately, but signing day is like the week after the final game of the year. So to me, if you're going to give the new coach any opportunity to salvage a high school class, you got to make that change sooner than later. But I think James Franklin is a name that's been tied to Florida State. Obviously, I think he would probably almost certainly take the job. He was actually my number 1 candidate for Florida State. And the skinny of why I say that is, if you have to fire Mike Norvell with his buyout, you are essentially going to be paying 2 head coaches for the next 5 to 6 years. And so you are going to be stuck with whoever you get for the next 5 to 6 years. You cannot blow this higher, because if you do, you can't fire 2 coaches. We just don't have that kind of money. And so I think that James Franklin gives you a guy who can come in and stabilize the program, win you 10 games a year, probably compete for the playoffs in the ACC.
You won't be bottoming out.
No, you won't. You won't be where you're at now. And I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, the 4-21 against, top 10 teams. And I get all that. But this is the ACC, right? Like, let's call it like it is. He's not probably going to be playing a lot of those teams in the ACC. And he'll be in the state of Florida where he can recruit elite talent. And he's shown a good ability to develop. I think he's put 56 players in the NFL when he was at Penn State. But I also think there is the side of Florida State where maybe you do take a little bit of a chance on a coordinator, right? You think of a Dan Lanning, a Kirby Smart, some of these guys who went straight into the head coaching role. And I look at a guy like Brian Hartline at Ohio State, a guy like Glenn Schumann at Georgia, the DC there. I think those are some of the options. What you're not probably going to do is get into a bidding war for like a Lane Kiffin, right? I just don't know that you have the money for that. So you're either going to have to keep Mike Norvell, or you're going to try and have to hit on someone, or get a James Franklin who maybe wants to go somewhere where you can win it all if he does have that chip on his shoulder. And then there's always the X factor that everyone loves or hates to talk about, the gilded ex-girlfriend, and that's Jimbo Fisher. Like, he is available. Could he come back? There is that side of it. I think there are a lot of people high up that would never have that happen. But I think there's also a lot of people that were like, man, even in a bad year, we were winning 10 games and playing in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of revisionist history when looking at James Franklin. From Virginia Tech standpoint, I have been on this train since day one that it would be a tremendous get. And now, granted,
Dynamite hire for Virginia Tech.
It took me a little bit of time to get there, and thankfully, my buddy Casey Hamrick actually suggested this a year and a half ago, and I had that first reaction where I was like, I don't want James Franklin. And then if you sit down and you think about it for 10 minutes, it's like, well, we haven't been able to beat Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, Boston College, like some of these schools with consistency. Maybe we don't need to worry about, can he beat Ohio State at Virginia Tech?
Exactly.
And if you flip the script on that too, at a certain standpoint, your message becomes stale. Florida State saw that happen with Jimbo Fisher, and I think that's what happened with James Franklin. Is at a certain standpoint with the fan base, with your team, with everybody, you can only be successful for so long at a certain place. And unless you're a Nick Saban, right, and some of those outliers, that's a little bit different. You saw it happen with Bobby Bowden when he lost his fastball. Yeah. That was more due to age than it was due to running its course. But it's an interesting situation, man. I look at this schedule, and again, you can justify to a pretty reasonable measure every game on this schedule except for Stanford. Virginia Tech would be one of those losses that are unjustifiable. And honestly, so is Florida and so is NC State. So it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. Any questions for you for Virginia Tech? I'll try to answer them as best as I can.
So first off, I think James Franklin would be a dynamite hire for Virginia Tech, right?
I would get naked and run outside.
Right, even in 20-degree weather. I tell everybody, I'm like, man, look, everyone talks about, he has a ceiling. I'm like, buddy, I would take 6 years of 10 wins right now. I would love to have that.
But how many coaches have had a ceiling until they don't? Like, that's the thing too. Like, like it's just.
And there's also you got Ryan Day, you got Dabo, and you got Kirby. There are no other that I can think of active head coaches with a national championship. So who are you going to get that's more proven right now than James Franklin?
Not to mention, up until a year ago, Ryan Day was the coach that had a ceiling. Up until 3 years ago, Kirby Smart was the guy who had a ceiling. And who was the third guy that you mentioned? Dabo Sweeney. Yep. Dabo Sweeney was consistently said, well, he's what do they call it? Clemsoning, until they don't do that anymore. So that drives me crazy when you say this person can't do X until they do. That is how it works.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. He could go off on a run for, a couple national championships. And then what do you say there? I mean, it took Jimbo a while to get up there. It took a lot of these coaches a while. People forget Ryan Day was almost going to get fired last year if he hadn't have done what he did. I mean, he was on the hot seat. But I think for Virginia Tech, man, first off, this is the game between two brands that I don't think play enough, right? I think the ACC has dropped the ball with that. I mean, these are two of my favorite fan bases in the ACC. Virginia Tech, I love working with everybody in the Virginia Tech space more than any other program because you guys are just one of the best fan bases out there, right? I'm still pissed that I have never been to Lane Stadium. Like,
you guys never come see us. You guys never come see us. I'm looking at that. We went over this on our last podcast. So since 2010, we played in 2010. That was the Tyrod Taylor game of the century. In 2012, last minute EJ Manuel touchdown in a freezing cold Lane Stadium. And that's the last time that you guys have been to Lane Stadium, was 2012. And then we played in 2018 in Tallahassee. We played in 2023 in Tallahassee, and we're playing in 2025 in Tallahassee. So not only do we not play enough, we play all of our games in Tallahassee. So
I really want to play in Blacksburg. And I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 99% sure this game was originally supposed to be in Blacksburg. And then when they did the expansion with the West Coast teams, they shuffled it, and now it's in Tallahassee, because I was looking forward to coming up to this game. But my one question for you on Virginia Tech, and I really do think when you look at a program like Florida State, we saw Bobby Bowden. Of course, he was the architect of the program. He did win some national championships there. He competed for a lot. Then you saw Jimbo Fisher come in, and he won a national championship. And then you saw Mike Norvell, who has been dog water. But he has been able to, even he fell into a 13-win season, and had Jordan Travis not have got injured, would have at least made the playoffs and I think competed or won a national championship. So my point to the question is, I think Florida State is honestly one good coaching hire away from being back to the program that we know it can be. There's some programs like a Texas A&M, and everyone talks about what Jimbo did at Texas A&M. Well, Elko might win it this year, but nobody has ever won there. And so I think you have some of these programs in the country that, like, if Florida gets a good coach, I think Lane Kiffin could probably win a national title there. So for me, for Virginia Tech, when I look at them, what is it going to take for Virginia Tech to get back to the glory days, so to speak? And is that obtainable? Now, I do know, and you can elaborate on this, but I did see the thing where there was supposed to be like a significant investment in the athletics department, which I believe, if I remember correctly, has kind of been the lead to the downfall. It's just underinvestment in football.
So I have two things. And one, you didn't ask me this question, but I think, and this actually will be received well by Florida State fans, or people will hate it. I think Florida State, if you look at LSU and you say that's Batman, because I think unequivocally LSU is a top 5 job. Like anybody can step in there and be successful. Robin is Florida State. There aren't that many programs who have had multiple coaches come in and win national titles since 2000. And Florida State is one of those schools that have been able to accomplish that. You're located in the state of Florida, which is an amazing place to recruit, very similar to LSU. It's interesting because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say, okay, your job is tied to where you rank in your own state. And there is no team that is the best team in Florida. That is consistently rotating, and there's enough talent in the state of Florida for all of those schools to get as much talent as they kind of really want to get. Talent's never been an issue for any one of those 3 schools, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the LSU job and I say that it's one of those really unique jobs that I think anybody would look to, I think Florida State is not as good as a job as LSU, but it is a very similar profile to LSU. If you want to look at it this way, there's a publicly traded company that has a really high rating on Open Doors. This would basically be a Series B funded team that has a really high rating on Open Doors. And that net of it is you can win a national championship for Florida State. To answer your question, Virginia Tech has underinvested in football for a very long time. I have been on record as saying that I think Justin Fuente was a very good coach who had a couple of poor decisions in terms of the staff, but ultimately was operating with a hand tied behind his back because of the investment that we had in football. I did a really long recap, and there was an article that came out from, I believe, One Texas or Texas One or something like that, where they dove into essentially where Virginia Tech was funding their football program, as opposed to, Virginia Tech fans like to look at themselves and say, we used to be Florida State. We used to be Clemson. We used to be some of these big schools. And that's true. But we had less recruiting analysts and less recruiting people when that mattered more than Wake Forest and Pittsburgh and UVA. And the expectation for the fan base is just to always walk all over these schools. And to Virginia Tech's credit, they kind of held up that end of the bargain. Like, it is still surprising when a Virginia Tech loses to a Pitt, loses to a Syracuse, loses to a Wake Forest. You still kind of stack rank them over. So number one, I think just investing in football is huge. Virginia Tech is not Virginia Tech without Michael Vick, Frank Beamer, and football success. It's just not. It's a school in the middle of a cow town, which I love. I said that last time, and people got a little upset with that. So I think that's step one, is investing correctly into your program. And I think for a lot of people, if Virginia Tech ends up with James Franklin, this is why I'm so all in on James Franklin. James Franklin immediately gets the buy-in from the donors and everybody to pour money into the football program. Now, I will just say my second choice is Bob Chesney. I think Bob Chesney would be a phenomenal coach. The problem that Bob Chesney is going to run into is that there won't be that same level of buy-in and investment from donors that there would be if it was James Franklin. So I think James Franklin puts you in a position to be as successful as you possibly can. And not to mention, if James Franklin's the coach of Virginia Tech next year, the most talented team that Virginia Tech has trotted out since at least 2020 is on the football field. And you're going to put in this infrastructure that he is going to bring over with him from Penn State. I'm not saying the coaches, I'm not saying the assistants as much as I'm saying just I've done this before and I know what it's supposed to look like. And I am the most important sports figure walking into any room in the state of Virginia. People will listen to what he has to say. I think that's step one. And again, why Florida State is so attractive and why Virginia Tech is so attractive is because you don't have to be as good as LSU or as good as Auburn needs to be to make the playoff. You really just need to be the best at a pretty small pond. And then when you get into the playoff, it just kind of is what it is. If you're looking to get to another job or you're looking to potentially compete for a national title, in the ACC as it stands in 2025 is a really good place to do it. And there's no better example to give other than there is a chance that Duke or Florida State, Duke or Virginia will be competing for a shot to play in the college football playoff, which is crazy to say, but it is very realistic. So that's kind of where I am.
It's funny because everyone's like, I want to get to the SEC and the Big Ten because they're a 3 and 4 and 5 and maybe 6 bid league and all that. And I'm like, I get that. But yes, the ACC might be a 2 bid league, maybe 1 bid this year. Which one of those bids is harder to win? To your point, right? I think if you're a pretty decent team in the ACC, you can grab one of those 2 bids. But I do think you're right when you talk about James Franklin and the excitement that he brings. I said this back when he first got hired. I said I was asked by another VT pod about what did I think about the state of VT football, and I said, I didn't think that Brent Pry screamed we're serious about football. But if you get James Franklin, I think you are going to be, first off, the attention you're going to get all offseason is going to be great. You know what I mean? And you got a guy who I think there really is something in knowing what it looks like. Now, he's never won a national championship, but he's been in the playoffs and he's won playoff games. Knowing what it looks like at that level, I think does make a really big difference. And if you guys get him and invest in the program, I still think of Virginia Tech as Florida State, Clemson, top of the ACC. Miami's doing their thing, they're up and down. They still got Cristobal as their head coach, so who knows what they'll ever be. And then Virginia Tech is right there. You know what I mean? Yeah. I still look at them as one of those upper tier teams. And I really do think, if you look at it from a league perspective, Miami's come back a little bit. If we could quit floundering and Clemson gets back to where they're at and Virginia Tech gets back to the Tech that we added in, when they first joined the conference, I think the ACC could be in a much better position as a conference as a whole. Had Miami and Virginia Tech not have had the fall off that they did, I don't think we're in the converse. I don't even think we're having the split apart conversations that we're having now. And so I would love to see Virginia Tech get back.
I agree. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, and I know that you weren't the person that did this, and I know that you had no impact on this. It is pretty hilarious that Zoom call happened where it's the ACC is holding Florida State back, and Florida State has won 2 games in league play in 2 years.
We're boycotting, I think.
That is just crazy. And I'll tell you what, as disappointing as last year was, it's so crazy that these 2 teams play such a hand in how the conference is viewed. And we literally just can't stop stepping all over ourselves. You guys were the only reason we weren't the national story last year in the ACC. The only reason that we weren't the talk of disappointment was because Florida State's disappointment was just greater. So it would be good for the league to have both of these teams be better. And I think Virginia Tech fans would, going to Tallahassee is one of our favorite places to go down. And college football legitimately is better when these programs are solid. So we can't meet
at 3 and 6 and 4 and 5, but when they talk about leveraging the bigger brands in the ACC against Notre Dame and things like that, I think this is a matchup that if you can get both of them back to, let's just say a 10-win region of being pretty good. This would be a huge matchup year in and year out. And the ACC, now that we don't have divisions anymore, to me would be dumb not to leverage this more often.
Completely agree with you. Last couple things before we go. I said we were going to talk for 15 minutes. Here we are on the verge of 40. Just a couple of ACC things. I'm going to ask you a question. I want your quick answer. Is Bill Belichick the coach at UNC in 6 months?
I don't think so. I thought that was going to be a disaster, and it's turned out to be that way. But don't they have to hire his son?
I am unfamiliar. I was literally texting a little bit, and I was like, is UNC back channeling somebody to interview? Because that's another school that just with the funding and everything else has been a disappointment. It's not the same disappointment that Clemson and Virginia Tech have been. And I'm not even talking about the Belichick era. I'm just talking about brand who has lots of money, who, if they took it seriously, could really elevate the conference. And
1,000% agree.
They are squarely in that conversation. Is Dabo Swinney coaching at Clemson next year? Now, I want to preface it by saying I don't think he's going to – I actually will say I would be shocked if he's fired, and I don't think he has any business being fired. Now, I can see a situation where Dabo's like, you know what? This is not fun anymore. And Clemson's like, you know what? We're not having that much fun either. And you just kind of go your separate ways.
Yeah, I think he probably will be the head coach there next year. But from what I've heard a little bit, there may be some forced changes coming. And I don't know how Dabo's going to receive that. And so I will at least say I think that era is coming to an end. I think the staleness on that program with him as the head coach is getting to where it's going to be too much to take. And I will say that I do agree with Dabo to a degree that Clemson may have gotten spoiled off of what he has done during his tenure. Clemson fans, should I say, where they expect it to be great every single year. But at the same time, like those are the expectations that you set when you win. And so to me, that should be a standard that's followed. And if you're not meeting it, then you should be gone. So I think he coached his way out of the Alabama game or the Alabama job and stuff like that. So I don't think it's going to be long that he's there, but I think he's probably going to maybe do some staff changes and then, but it's hard. You just brought in that DC and Garrett Riley, was a big hire at the time. So what changes are you even going to make that are going to make a difference? And so, yeah, I think the time is coming that's going to end. I just don't think it's going to be next year.
Any fits that you like for openings right now that you'd like to bumble? And I'll give you two. Brian Dable is not a bad fit at Penn State. Brian Dable was just relieved from his duties with the New York Giants. First of all, he was wearing a Penn State shirt today. I thought that was interesting. The New York Times put a picture out of him. He's from Rochester, New York. And Penn State, they fired James Franklin, and every name that they've brought up is unimpressive.
It was premature, I think.
Is Marcus Freeman leaving Notre Dame for Penn State? No chance. Is Dan Lanning leaving for Penn State? No. And then you look at some of the names they floated out. Matt Rule, he's 0-18 in his last.
Why? Yeah, that makes no sense.
Then you look at Drinkwitz over at Missouri, who I like, but you're again selling Penn State fans on we want the anti-James Franklin, but we're bringing in James Franklin with hair and he's more quirky. I don't understand that either. So I really am fascinated to see who the next head coach is at Penn State. Maybe it's Brian Kelly, but it's bizarre to me. Do you have anybody on Penn State that you like?
Actually, that's not a bad fit. Brian Kelly. I mean, he's kind of that Northeast type of guy. I think that would work. I think Dayball would be good. They've went the NFL route before with Bill O'Brien, and it did work given the situation. I personally don't love the thought of an NFL coach like at Florida State because I want someone with a proven recruiting history. You talk about John Gruden and things like that. I think Kiffin will end up at Florida. I think I think Florida's willing to go all in on him. I think that's the case. And I think when you look at Ole Miss, nobody has ever really won there. And Florida can at least show we've won 3 national championships. So I think you can win there. Now, that's if they can fight off LSU. I don't know that Lane really fits at LSU. That just doesn't seem – the shenanigans kind of don't seem like a big fit there. I think John Summerall would be a name to kind of watch there from Tulane going over to LSU. But it feels like they're going to want maybe more of a splash hire if you're firing Brian Kelly and paying that much to do that. So there's just so many openings right now. Hey, man, who knows? Maybe Gus goes back to Auburn. Who knows, right?
I think you're going to see Summerall at Auburn. I think you're going to see Summerall take the Auburn job. If I were,
and that's a good hire.
It's a great hire for Auburn. Yeah. I really, really, really think that Lane's going to end up staying at Ole Miss. Just given the history of if you're Lane Kiffin and you look at a situation like, how am I forgetting this dude's name? Head coach at UNLV. He's a candidate for Virginia Tech.
Dan Mullen.
Dan Mullen. Mullen left the state of Mississippi when he had it humming to go to Florida and then was given an immediate leash. And if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm saying I can do whatever the hell I want here. I go to my yoga classes. I do whatever I do and nobody bothers me. And they're going to build a statue of me and I'm going to win 1 million games at Ole Miss. Yeah. You said nobody's ever won there. They've won, I believe the statistic is they've won 10 games or more 5 times since 1972. Lane Kiffin is responsible for 3 of them. And I think that he can at least compete for a national title. So that'll be fascinating. And the last one I'll leave you with before we just talk very high level about the Florida State Virginia Tech game. Boston College should move on from Bill O'Brien.
1,000%.
And they should hire Bob Chesney. Bob Chesney coached at Holy Cross. He coached at Assumption. I think he is going to be a tremendous coach wherever he does end up going. If Virginia Tech misses on James Franklin, I want Bob Chesney, and I will beg donors to get on board with Bob Chesney. Yeah. But if you're Boston College, I don't know why you wouldn't take a shot with him, because how much more does Bill O'Brien really want to be there? And I don't dislike Bill O'Brien, but I mean, we're 1-8, so I think that would
Yeah,
be a good hire.
I don't think he wants to deal with everything comes with the college game anymore. And DeChesney is a great name. Like my co-host, that's who he wants for Florida State. Like if we don't get a James Franklin or something like that, he thinks, that's a really great hire. And I agree with it. I think Alex Golish is another name that could be interesting there at South Florida. If Florida State gets in the market, if Florida misses on Kiffin, could Golish be a guy that goes to Gainesville? I think there's a lot of names to watch, but it feels like there's a lot more jobs than there are big names, right?
Yeah.
Right now. Like there's no Saban out there anymore that you can hire. I mean, like you're getting retraded Jimbo or, I think the prize fight right now is for James Franklin. I think that's probably the hottest name out there other than Lane Kiffin. And he's going to come with a really big price tag. And like you said, he may just be happy just not having crazy expectations and winning games and living life.
There are some good coordinators out there too, and schools are like, we're above hiring a coordinator. But you can't tell me that Colin Klein down at Texas A&M wouldn't be a good hire, or Will Stein over at Oregon wouldn't be a good hire. I also think a good coach, people have really disagreed with me on this. I think Jeff Lebby would be a really good coach too. Now, the results at Mississippi State haven't been great, but again, he's at Mississippi State. But Bob Chesney, you're going to have a really hard time. I was talking about this earlier with my guy, PP. Penn State, if you're looking at it in a vacuum, it would be a pretty good spot for Bob Chesney to go to. The problem is you're not going to have that buy-in that you need to get the donor dollars in to give him what he needs to win. But if you're talking about a football coach who took over JMU, taking over a JMU after Kurt Signetti takes everything that he wants from JMU and takes it to Indiana, and he's still successful and he still might make the college football playoff this year, I think he deserves unlimited amounts of kudos. So
yeah. And I will give you the best fit. I think the best fit of the whole hiring process, Memphis just had a head coaching job open up, and we have Memphis's former head coach. So like we will FedEx him right on back to Memphis, and he can just take over his old job. I would love that more than anything.
Last thing, just your high level thoughts on this game. How do you think it unfolds, and a score prediction from you?
So I think with this one, it's a little tough because what Florida State team are we going to get? I think that's where I'm at. We have played better at home. We're 4-2 at home. We just beat Wake at home. We beat Alabama at home. The losses even came against a good Pitt team and a good Miami team. So we do play a lot better at home. I will give them that. I don't think this team has quit yet. I don't think Virginia Tech has quit yet either. I mean, when you look at the scores, they're pretty close. Yeah. And so I will say if this game was being played in Blacksburg, I would pick Florida State to lose because obviously we can't win a road game to save our life. I know Virginia Tech plays well at home, but when I look at this one, man, I just kind of look at the offense has kind of been struggling a little bit for Virginia Tech. Our offense has kind of been humming a little bit. I like some of the matchups in this where your passing offense is not the greatest, but our secondary is our weakness. And so I think I like the matchup there. Your rushing offense is your strength. Our rushing defense is our strength. So I think that's one that I'm watching there. From the other side of the ball, Florida State offense going against the Virginia Tech defense, it seems pretty balanced there as far as what you guys are able to stop from the pass to the run. And you've not been great against the pass in certain areas, but we're not a throw-heavy team. So that does worry me a little bit. Can we run on Virginia Tech? But then I see 121st in rushing touchdowns and things like that. So if we can get the ball moving on the ground, I think Florida State will win. And I'll give you an interesting stat that will literally determine the game because it has so far every time. So watch the attempts by Tommy Castellanos, right? In our 4 wins so far this season, Florida State, when Tommy throws the ball, the more he throws, the worse we get. And it sounds really crazy to say, right? But in the 4 wins, he's averaged 13.5 attempts per game, none over 20 attempts. In our 5 losses, he's averaging 34.2 attempts per game, and he's thrown for over 20 attempts in all the games. So if he comes out and he throws for 30 times, 40 times in this game, he threw 43 times against Clemson. You never want Tommy Castellanos throwing the ball 40 times. No offense to Tommy. He has been nursing a little bit of an ankle injury since Pitt, so he's not been as dynamic of a runner as
you guys have ran him 100
to.
times. I wonder why he's banged up.
Yeah, he's pretty. I mean, he took some shots at the Stanford game too, and so he has not been the effective runner that we'd hoped, and so that kind of limits where things are at. So I think if we can establish the run, and he throws it 15, 18 times, I think we'll come out on top. If he throws the ball, if you guys stop the run pretty well and we're throwing it 35 times, I think we're going to lose. But I'm going to go with Florida State at home. I just look at, Virginia Tech's been a little rough in the red zone on defense and things like that. So we've been pretty decent in the red zone. I think Florida State will come out on top in this one. I'll say two things. First off, I don't understand how this is a 13.5-point spread. Like, Vegas must not watch our games because they favored us through like 1-8 last year. I don't understand it. I don't think it's going to be a 13.5-point game. I have Florida State winning a close one, 31-21. They win, Virginia Tech covers, and we're still fighting for bowl eligibility. But, again, I could see Virginia Tech beating us. It just depends on which team shows up for FSU. But I think being at home is the difference. Last one at home, it's at night. Senior night, you'll probably have a decent little crowd. It won't be crazy, but I think that'll be enough to get you over the hump. If it was in Blacksburg, I'd go Virginia Tech all day.
I'll end it with Virginia Tech 24, Florida State 38. Just can't score, and that's how it's going to go. So,
yeah,
Jesse, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate you always jumping on. Keep up the awesome work. For people that are looking for your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, look, we are suffering through this together, right? So we had Noles Therapy on Monday night, a live stream where we could just kind of come and vent. So we are Plant the Spear. We do have a website, plantthespear.com. You can find links to everything that we do, podcasts, YouTube, written articles, all that stuff. Obviously, you can find us on YouTube and on social media, which is where we're most active. I will be down in Tallahassee this weekend. So if you see me around, say hi. Love meeting with everybody, whether it be Virginia Tech fans or Florida State fans. I love all that stuff. I just love doing this. So looking forward to it, man. And again, I appreciate you having me on. I love Hokie Nation, right? You guys are awesome. You are one of my favorite fan bases to work with. So hopefully we have a good game on Saturday, and then hopefully I can get to Blacksburg sometime real soon, man.
Keep up the awesome work, Jesse. Appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate it, man.